When you think of competitive vampire counts armies, you probably don't think Heinrich Kemmler first, and you also probably don't think zombies. But what if I told you that those were the two main ingredients in an awesome army put together by Woof Wowaz that might make you rethink the vampires a little? In fact, it'll probably have you saying in the end, what the Krell just happened? Alright, so as you saw in the intro, I'm going to be talking about the vampires. Now, I showed you kind of an all-around vampire army the other day that involved Varghulfs. This one's a bit more ghostly or ethereal in nature, which is interesting because Kemmler is not generally thought of as probably one of the competitive lords for the vampire counts. I think the Red Duke and Mannfred pretty much steal the show, and occasionally you'll see Vlad. But yeah, Kemmler. Why Kemmler for this army? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One's going to be his Master of the Dead here. It's going to constantly heal allies in range, and it's going to replenish the hit points of combatants as long as their leadership isn't broken. So, great to have. 30 meters, it's extra healing. Then you get Curse of Undeath. Anytime he's casting, there's 7 seconds of healing, and it can actually resurrect dead combatants. That doesn't last for real long, so probably not a ton of resurrecting. Don't forget that Kemmler can summon Krell, and Krell has a lot of armor-piercing anti-large damage, so an interesting character. Then over here, he's got this Chaos Tomb Blade, which gives him 5 extra, or it gives all your units extra melee attack within the 30-meter radius. This also resurrects dead combatants and replenishes the health of the combatants, and of course it has to finish healing before it resurrects the next unit. So Kemmler can just consistently regenerate the army around him if he stays close to it. And then if you look at the rest of the units in this army, a Banshee. Okay, well, Banshees can be pretty darn useful. They've even got some abilities here that you could consider bringing, like the drop leadership or whatever else. But for the most part, if you look at the Banshee, not a lot of hit points, but they're ethereal and they have armor piercing. And they cause terror. And the terror is a really big, important piece there. So unless your opponent brings a lot of magic damage to the field, they're not going to be very well prepared for this army, because the goal here is that the zombies have all these hit points that have to be taken down before they can be killed. And remember, they're healing all the while. The Cairn Wraiths actually deal a little bit of damage, and they do some magical damage. And again, they're ethereal, so unless you have magical damage, it's very hard to kill them. Hex Wraiths, these guys are going to be fantastic at rear charging, and they have Vanguard, so they can start deployed anywhere on the map. They can harass skirmishers, they can harass artillery, and they're pretty tough when it comes to a cavalry fight. Again, unless that cavalry has magical damage, these guys they're pretty good. I don't know if you remember it, but we watched them pretty much just take down Demigryph Knights with halberds. They're a solid unit when it comes to that, a very solid unit. So just something to be aware of in that regard. And then you combine the infantry line with Mortis Engines. The Mortis Engines cause terror. They're like a war chariot, essentially. You get them into battle. They can cause some damage with their charges. They have anti-infantry armor piercing. Very useful at taking down infantry. And while they're engaged in combat, they're peeling the hit points off of the enemy army. Right? And they move around. They stay mobile. So a very interesting army. This one is meant to grind and cause damage, while Kemmler's healing is giving the vampires the ability to last long enough to win that kind of grind fight. And Kemmler can be viewed as somewhat weak, and so sometimes people will drop down trying to kill him, or expend a lot of energy trying to kill him. He just heals really fast. So if you were going to kill him, you've got to straight up take him out. Because if you don't, he's just going to heal off a lot of what you're throwing at him. Let's go get a view of this. So like I said, Woof Wowaz, who has submitted many replays to me before, he submitted this replay, and he's taken on a player who's a good player himself, who brings a competitive build, definitely intending to win this match, right? So it wasn't just some unsuspecting noob online that he gets matched against. So let's see how this goes. So the high elf player brings an army that to me makes a lot of sense versus the vampires. A little bit of range that can also help protect themselves against dire wolves. or other such units. Bats. A couple of dragons, because dragons are hard for vampires to kill. I mean, that's all there is to it. Dragons are difficult for vampires to kill. He's got a prince, because it's a cheap way to get a star dragon. And then he's got the moon dragon. A spear line, high elf spears perform fairly well. High defense, anti-large. And then he's got a few white lions, including the Pure Main Company, which can sunder armor. If I remember right. Yep. Sundered armor. And like I said, just the 2 Lothern Sea Guards. So that's the high elf army. And he sees what Wawazg is working towards over here. Here's the army that I showed you just a moment ago. You see the Banshees down here, relatively near Kemmler, who kind of tries to stay right in the middle of this. And again, hit point sponge zombies surrounding Cairn Wraiths. The Mortis engines can move freely, try and lure in attacks, right? Just remember, the Mortis engines are pretty squishy to stuff like dragons. So you do have to be careful, keep them close to support, and the idea is that if you did get dive bombed by the dragons, you're moving those things around, and then you're sending in your Banshees and other units to slow down the dragons. So let's just kind of watch what happens. So the 2 dragons come up over here for the high elf player. And the first thing they're going to do is try and target Kemmler with breath attacks, thinking they can just quickly burn him out of the game because he has no recourse. So we had 1 breath attack. Should see the second one coming here. Both of them score a hit. Kemmler loses half his health. But now what? You got to wait on the next breath attack. What happens if he charges down into combat? Well, he's facing an entire army, including 2 Banshees, which can do quite a lot of damage. So he can charge down, but the dragons are a little bit out of place. Could they make the kill? Possibly. They have the high mage back here to heal them, but they're taking the risk of diving down without any support nearby. And it is indeed a big risk. Now, is there a benefit to what they just did to Kemmler? Sure. Kemmler's going to be wasting a lot of his potential replenishment. So, I mean, that's the benefit, but it's also taking breath attacks off the dragon, which could be useful. You're going to see over here, he's going to use his Hex Wraiths to kind of keep the attention of the High Elf army while he moves up towards the High Elves through the forest. I'll fast forward a little bit. I'm going to see a second wave of breath attacks come in. This one, not as useful because he uses the Cloak of Mist and Shadows, which gives him all that physical resistance. So the High Elf player didn't catch this. And that physical resistance makes Kemmler very strong against that, and so he's going to shrug off the next 2 breath attacks. So very well played by Wawaz there, using the special abilities of Kemmler to avoid taking some tremendous damage right there. And basically, now the dragons have wasted 2 of their 3 breath attacks. So if I fast forward again, because the vampires are very slow, you're going to see more Hex Wraith taunting going off in the background. See these Mortis engines just kind of itching to go charging into the enemy lines, but they're charging forward, maybe trying to lure in charges, maybe not. Maybe they're just getting ahead. See the Hex Wraiths getting pretty close here, starting to come under a little fire. A little bit of miss micro here and there, and then at this point the dragons, I think, are going to go try and focus on those Hex Wraiths because they're going to cause a lot of trouble. Well, that's going to work out for Wawaz because then that means his Mortis engines and his healing infantry line. Now look at this. See, his infantry line is taking some damage. They're just healing and resurrecting this whole time. So they'll be back up to near full strength. And they'll heal very quickly. And so again, these spearmen have to try and cut through the hit points of the zombie while also dealing with an ethereal Cairn Wraith. It's difficult. It's not easy to do. One of the Banshees gets mismicroed out here to the flank temporarily, but you can see this is where the Mortis engines go ahead and charge in. And now units will start losing hit points because of the Mortis engine. The dragon comes down. Not really sure what the target here. May have been the Mortis engine, but ends up fighting a Banshee. It's not going to go great because the dragon doesn't have magical attacks. So the Banshee's going to do fairly well, all things considered. You can see that the High Elf player is going to be very careful with their mage. It's on a horse. They can keep it away. Here, the Hex Wraiths get an opportunity to combine with the Banshee, the Mortis engine to quickly knock out a Lothern Sea Guard. The dragon wants to come intercede here, but it's too late. And you can see that the vampire units just kind of continue to move around. As the dragons land, the Hex Wraiths are around to potentially harass. In this case, the Hex Wraiths are running away because the dragons actually got a better situation. Banshee getting knocked around a little bit. Again, they're not going to die quickly. They're just not going to die quickly. And you can see that the main army back here just tanking damage and healing. Just tank and heal, tank and heal. And you can see here how that's working. These guys will soak up some damage and then they just start healing it back. And then here comes the Mortis engine. It also has a healing aura. I don't know if it's the same one that Kemmler's putting out. If it doesn't overlap, then it's just more healing auras, and I did forget to look at that. But watch this. The two dragons decide, all right, we've had enough of this. We're going to take Kemmler out of the fight. Well, here comes Krell, the old friend. And Krell deals some nasty damage versus large. He does take a lot of damage at first, but if you look, he's already taken a pretty nice chunk out of this dragon. He's not going to be stopping, and here comes two banshees on top of that. So does he take a beating from the dragon? He absolutely does. But then by the time the banshees get here, again, there's a mortis engine engaged in combat. There's infantry tanking, and so the dragons start to take a considerable amount of damage. And this is good. I mean, the dragons can be healed. Look at this. Summon up zombies. Other units just create more sponge that the high elves have to work their way through. All the while, you can see back here the mortis engine doing its thing, getting more kills, charging. This one's engaged over here, so again, sucking the life out of the high elves over here. Eventually, you're going to see an upgraded regrowth come in on the moon dragon, which it badly needs at this point. The moon dragon's going to try and get away. It's being pursued by hex wraiths. It's going to make it difficult to get away. Here comes the Cairn wraiths as well, so the dragon's going to have difficulty getting back in the air. Eventually, though, the dragons should be able to use their mass to get back in the sky. This one, luckily, had the physical resistance and continued to heal even though it routed. So the High Elf player buys himself some more time here. You can see he's taking his mage over to be hidden on the edge of the woods so that it can't be found by the vampires. Kemmler survived that assault, and Krell has gone on to do a lot of damage, still chasing the High Elf Prince here. So the not-so-honorable retreat of the High Elf Prince in the face of a bunch of ghosts. Man, those sounds coming off the mortis engine are just freaking awesome. The sounds in this game in general are amazing. I remember the first time I played it, I couldn't believe how cool it sounded. Interesting attack there from the dragon. It definitely did some damage, but he also hit his own spearmen to some extent, and they end up routing there as well. And you can see that the fear here, the fear, the terror, it's not good. You gotta face up against all that. If your lord's not around all the time, it gets difficult for your units to hold up against the hit point sponge zombies combined with the terror of the Cairn wraiths. And then you can summon zombies for rear attacks. You can do all kinds of stuff. Kemmler bobbing and weaving the best he can. He is under some heavy dragon attack here because at this point the High Elf players have got to be furious and wanting to see Kemmler dead. So he's going to keep pursuing him. But the dragons are having a hard time. They're losing all their support units on the ground, and it's going to get harder and harder. But Kemmler gets hit here, and he does go down. So Kemmler down, folks. Krell's still alive. That's going to take away a lot of replenishment on the part of the vampires. Not all of it, though. So remember, the mortis engines have the ability to help regenerate hit points on nearby units as well. So it's not entirely gone. And you still got the two banshees for leadership's sake. So the vampires are definitely not out just because they lost their leader. But it is going to hurt. Definitely will hurt. See some of these Lothern Seaguard have regrouped. Krell's finally going to get cut down over here, but he may even get in a little more damage here before he goes down. And again, the mortis engine's engaged, so that's good. Going to be losing hit points slow and steady on the dragon. Definitely what the vampire wants. Krell actually never drops in that fight, though he's about to go down regardless, just due to the hit point situation. Look here at the banshees combining with the zombies, more summoned zombies, Cairn wraiths. The leadership of the High Elves is just not able to handle it. There's just not enough units left to tank all this out. So now the Lothern Seaguard will get singled out. The dragons are looking for targets of opportunity, but they're losing their ground force here. And are being pressured into worse and worse scenarios that they have to try and deal with. Dragons don't have magic attacks. So yes, they do a tremendous amount of damage, but a huge percentage of it is just ignored. Remember, that's the ethereal trait. Go down here, you can find it. Physical resistance, 75%. That's what comes with the ethereal trait. So basically, 3/4 of everything the dragon does just gets ignored. And so that's why it takes so long and it's so difficult for them to do the damage to all these ethereal units. Plus, when you put in the zombies and other units that are just tanking hit points, causing the attack animations, all that kind of stuff, it works out quite well. So really a pretty clever synergy here for the vampires to bring you a lord that doesn't otherwise get a ton of use except just for fun. You know, like the people who just really enjoy getting to see Krell and Kemmler come onto the battlefield. But here you've got a legitimate strategy that works out even against a competitive player and a competitive build. And this case. And I mean, you can see he is definitely trying to make a game of it here with the dragons. I don't think that the high elf player may have played perfectly, but the vampire player didn't play perfectly either. And I mean, it's definitely a competitive game. I've not run into any of the Han guys online that didn't give me a heck of a game, most of the time winning. So I know he's up against a good player here. I know he's up against a good player. Yeah, you can see the dragons at this point are just going to have a hard time getting away. They don't have any infantry for protection, and they've got to run away from hex wraiths to get back in the air. It's not going to make it easy. So you can see the prince is well and truly surrounded here. Mortis engines making their way back over here as well. And again, remember when the Mortis engines are around, the regeneration can continue to take place. Some of the high elf units are trying to come back from routing, and eventually that lord is going to get back in the air, but you can see the dragons only have so much healing they can do, and there's only so much winds and magic. How much longer can the mage, the Lord of Life, keep the dragons in the fight? That's such a cool looking unit model right there too. Let's get a good view. Don't run off. I'm talking about you. Yeah, that's a freaking awesome looking unit model. Man, CA did so good with this stuff. So good. Anyway, let you all get back over here and see how this finishes out. So, in the comments, I know we've got a few minutes of battle here left. Tell me what you think. What do you think of this build? It's definitely a different way to use the vampires, and it doesn't surprise me coming from WoW as that guy's always coming up with something different to use. I love the way that he just constantly challenges the standard thinking for a faction or the use of factions. And it really makes for some interesting armies over time that I've seen from him, and some interesting tactics. See with the dragons here, he's going to try and stay away, but I mean, the high elf player really has no recourse at this point. He should be mostly out of magic. He's trying to run away from hex wraiths. You can see he continually tries to do damage, but the key units that need to die here are the banshees, and he really doesn't have a good answer to the banshees. So you can see that some of the units for the vampires will get split off and attacked here, to some good effect even, by the High Elf Lord. But for the most part, there's just too many vampires left. You can see how hard it is still for those units to die. And so the vampire reinforcement's able to get back over here and continue to fight, and the dragons just can't sustain this. So are Arcan Wraiths particularly good at killing dragons? No, they sure aren't. But the dragons aren't particularly good at killing the Cairn Wraiths. And eventually it just becomes a game of outlasting the other. And the dragons aren't going to be able to outlast it here. It's going to be the long and short of it. They couldn't outlast. So, interesting pick. Like I said, not necessarily a pick that's particularly good at killing dragons. It's just a pick that's hard to kill. And it can leech hit points slowly and surely off of an enemy, playing on the fear and the terror as well. So, I really like this. I think this is a cool army from WoofWowaz. I really appreciate him submitting it. He submitted me several replays where he used it, and it worked in all of them, but I showed this one because I felt like it was the most competitive match that he ended up in with it. Obviously, if someone comes to the fight that's less competitive, it's really going to throw him for a loop. But I think this is an interesting way to play the vampires. Like I said, I really appreciate how WoWaz is always challenging the conventional wisdom and trying something different. So if you guys have replays like this for yourself, where you have an interesting synergy with the particular faction, lord, magic, units, whatever it is, send it to me. Let me see it. I'll try and make videos out of it. I've really been enjoying this opportunity to try and teach people how to keep the multiplayer fresh and fun in this game, despite the fact that the game's been out for a long time, right? Hey, and if you enjoyed this video, if you're not that High Elf Prince and you enjoyed the video, make sure and hit that like button. Helps me a lot, helps these videos get found, and helps build up this community. Same thing, if you want to see more, subscribe. Go hit the subscribe button, and then of course YouTube has that stupid bell. I mean, you have to click the bell also if you want to get notifications, even though clicking subscribe should give you notifications, but whatever, I can't help that. Click the bell, be the first to know about the new videos. Leave your comments, I would love to see them. Thank you so much for watching. It's a pleasure to make this content for you, and I hope you thoroughly enjoy it as much as I thoroughly enjoy making it for you. Again, thank you to WoWaz for submitting HeirofCarthage. Signing out for now. I'll be back with more soon.